The His Girl Friday podcast is brought to you in part by Messenger Fellowship, living the kingdom, fulfilling the call, proclaiming the truth. It's a brand new year. How's it going, everyone? This is Cameron Fry with His Girl Friday and Fry Freelance wishing you a happy new year in case I haven't wished it to you already. But we're 3 days into 2019, and we sincerely hope that you enjoyed your holiday stretch. I know for me it was too short and too long at the same time. In fact, there was one point where I thought about cutting a pod to talk about just kind of where I missed it this holiday season. I'm leaving Christmas on kind of a bittersweet note because, yes, it was good. It was great to begin to live through my kids and being able to surprise them. I know my oldest kid, and he's turning 3 next week. He is starting to kind of get the hang of what Christmas is all about. And so this was the first Christmas where I really looked forward to his response. So that's a pro. On the con side, I just feel like I didn't give as much as I wanted to give. I knew my parameters within my own family, but outside of that, I just feel like I could have sacrificed more. There was an outing. There was an outreach event called the Manger in my hometown here in Nashville that it really was evangelism based. You know, there's a lot of operations like Operation Christmas Child where a lot of shoe boxes full of toys are being filled, and there's a lot of indirect evangelism, but this was like more of a direct evangelism type thing where you have the potential to and the opportunity to lead people to Jesus. People who are there, they're there for a reason. They're not there by mistake, and so it's at least that's the best way I can frame it. So I wanted to do that, but something came up in the schedule, and there were just times where I just felt really overwhelmed by my to-do list, and just so much just felt like a formality, even though giving to family is good, and having structure and that's all great, but sometimes the joy of Christmas gets a little snuffed out by family jogging for position. You're going to be over here at this time. When are you going to come over to our side and hang out? Like, there's a lot of jogging back and forth that happens, and that's no disrespect to my fam. I think it's good to hit up, all your, if you can, hang out with as much fam as possible. That's the whole point of the holidays, or at least one of the big ones. Remembering Jesus, of course, reflecting on him, the cross and the manger together. I mean, that's really what the season's all about. So, I don't know what the solve is, and I know this is not related to what I want to talk about tonight, but just know that I'm looking ahead to next Christmas and begin to think, how do I want to simplify it? In fact, that might be the series that I initiate this November, just Christmas Simplified. How do we soak in the Advent season? I wasn't so exposed to it because a lot of December I was just helping out in different avenues at my church on Sunday mornings, and I just felt kind of a disconnect from the true reason for the season. I knew it conceptually. I know I even alluded to it in my last pod, but I just felt detached from it, and I just felt very dissatisfied. So maybe some of you feel that same way. If so, I want to circle back to this topic. But for now, we're in a new year, and this is the first pod I'm cutting in 2019. This is kind of exciting. And the theme, the message tonight is intentionality. And I'm really burning about this tonight. Like, this is hot off the press. I didn't write anything. This is all kind of just flowing from the heart. And it's just, like I said, it's certified fresh. Intentionality. It's a word that is thrown out a lot this time of year. A lot of people making their resolutions. I'm big on the word risk-illusion because I want my resolutions to carry holy courage with it. It's a word that's thrown out a lot, but we lose sight what it's all about. I think a lot of us forget what it really means. We put it out there casually in conversation, but we lock it up in vague terms. It's like we inadvertently confine and restrict it, which defeats the purpose, in part, of intentionality. So we got to be intentional in how we use the word intentionality. That's part of why I'm cutting this. I think for many of us, we understand that it implies specificity and an upgrade in dedication and devotion. I think for some of us, we associate it to being mindful more often. But intentionality is way more than that. It's knowing what true commitment is all about and seeing the covenant in that commitment. Are we willing to hold on to a particular goal or outcome or desire at all costs? So we say we live on purpose, or we want to, but I don't think we really break it out how we're going to get there. We live in a day and an age where the bottom line is the most important, and the bottom line is more important than even how we get there. So intentionality is like this bottom line term more than the road and the journey getting there. So I really want to flip this conversation on its head a little bit and really reframe how we view intentionality. And we're going to use the word, of course, our ultimate tool, our sword, to help define it. But just an example for me, because sometimes the best examples are the ones right under your nose. I am going to try and read the whole Bible in the next 3 months, which is pretty ambitious. I've done the whole Bible in a year program, and that was intense in and of itself. I didn't quite meet it in time. I needed a year and a half to get there, just being honest. But I'm really going to try and read the Bible between now and the end of March, leading up to whenever Easter is. And if I miss the mark, then I'm confident that I'll be able to get at least half a year, which is still a great outcome. So yeah, one of the reasons why I'm excited about this is because the goal stemmed from a place of community. And that's one of the points I want to talk about. Intentionality not only requires commitment, but accountability. And where is that accountability coming from? I suggest that there's a communal component that must be integrated into our intentionality. It doesn't always have to be an actual person in your life. It can just be between you and God, but still, there's still a relational element between you and God. There's still a communal component that's keeping intentionality from being this individual effort. Again, I think we inadvertently contain it in individual striving. That's not what intentionality is about. That's the opposite side to it. And when we integrate the relational and accountability components in, this ultimately helps us keep our why in mind. It keeps the goal in front of us instead of drifting to the side where it's more of a periphery thing. I think a lot of us are passionate about the why. All right, so back to my goal of reading the Bible in 3 years. This was something like I knew heading into this year that I needed structure. I needed some kind of boundaries and also kind of a roadmap to kind of contain my Bible reading so it wasn't just random, spontaneous. I think sometimes for me, me being in the Word, it's all conviction-based. Like the Holy Spirit's like, hey, have you spent time with me? Have you spent time with me? And I'm like, oh, you know what? I need to do that. And it's reactionary. And I think that the way culture coats intentionality, it's this reactionary term. It's not supposed to be that way. Leslie and I feel really strongly and convicted in our own lives that a lot of what we did, while a lot of it was good and / great in 2018, a lot of it was reactionary. I mean, that's just the best word for it. We just felt prompted and kind of pushed into the place that we're supposed to go rather than kind of scoping out and plotting. We plotted out in shallow terms, but we didn't really, ultimately we just felt God's push the whole year. And there's times for that. That's not a bad thing. But just seeking the Lord and, being intentional is like, all right, God, like going to Him and referencing and yielding to Him. That's where culture is not going to understand that side of intentionality. There's a referencing and a yieldedness, surrender to Christ. Much of the intentionality that's referenced in the Word, it centers and pivots off of God's anointings and appointings. Real quick before I forget, got a little bit ahead of myself there. Going back to the Bible plan, what triggered this specific plan was being in relationship with one of my peers. He's on staff at my local church, and I noticed he was going to do this as well. So there was accountability that was etched into the goal that was set, the resolution that was set. And so now there's that established accountability. That was a bonus. We didn't have the idea together necessarily, but we kind of converged on it. Now we could have conversation and dialogue and be able to exchange, interact, and all of a sudden this resolution, this goal is something that can be engaged cross-communally. So I'm really excited about that. Of course, you still want to be like, all right, God, I don't want to just assume that this is from you just because someone else is doing it. That's also important, and I'm going to get to that later. We still need to reference the Lord first and foremost when it comes to being intentional about anything. But I just wanted to mention that part before I forgot. All right. So much of intentionality, referencing the word, it centers on God's anointings and appointments. So what's our part then? Ephesians 5:15-17 paints it very clearly. Knowing his will, if I had to define it in 3 words. And Ephesians 5 is where we're going to camp out tonight. And this is at least the first half. And in Ephesians 5, part 1, it's all about being imitators of Christ. And the context leading up to this particular passage, these 3 verses here, starting in 15, it centers on being living as children of light and knowing what's worth participating / what's not worth participating in. So let's just go to it, shall we? Let's talk about, we're going to read it in both the Amplified and the Message. Actually, let's read the English Standard Version first. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. So that's the English Standard Version. Amplified. Therefore, see that you walk carefully, living life with honor, purpose, and courage, shunning those who tolerate and enable evil, not as the unwise, but as wise, sensible, intelligent, discerning people, making the very most of your time on earth, recognizing and taking advantage of each opportunity, and using it with wisdom and diligence, because the days are filled with evil. Therefore, do not be foolish and thoughtless, but understand and firmly grasp what the will of the Lord is. All right, let's see if we can get to the Message here. We're going to come back to the Amplified in just a moment. All right. So being imitators of Christ. The Message, wake up from your sleep, is what the chapter is entitled. I think it's interesting. Don't waste your time on useless work, mere busy work, the barren pursuits of darkness. Expose these things for the sham they are. It's a scandal when people waste their lives on things they must do in the darkness where no one will see. Rip the cover off those frauds and see how attractive they look in the light of Christ. Wake up from your sleep, climb out of your coffins. Christ will show you the light. So watch your step, use your head, make the most of every chance you get. These are desperate times. Don't live carelessly, unthinkingly. Make sure you understand what the Master wants. Boom. That's what intentionality looks like. I just feel like this particular verse and the entire Word of God just really just but really just it makes a beeline for what intentionality is. There's other references that I thought about going into. There's the Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Isaiah 61:1. That's the whole Spirit of the Lord is upon me. The Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. Psalm 139, that's kind of like Jeremiah 1:5, where you form my inward parts, you need to be together in my mother's womb. I fearfully and wonderfully made. Really, if you do a synoptic run through of the Bible and you see anointing or appointing or appoint, anoint, some variation of that word, appointment, a lot of times you're going to find intentionality is right there with it. But Ephesians 5 is where we are tonight. And I just love how this passage exposes how we often treat and handle intentionality as this reactionary buzzword. I can't stand buzzwords, especially in the body of Christ, because it's like, it's good to have conviction resonate within you. It's good to have that light switch turn on. But when it's like, oh man, this is like trending spiritually, maybe, like, I don't know how to frame it. It's like a mixture of ecclesiology and hipster, bohemian, whatever you want to call it. It's like, ooh, this looks cool. This sounds good. And it's like something that sounds good and we go after it right away. But I guess what I'm trying to say is with buzzwords, it's like, to me, it just implies that you're not going after the Lord's heart first and foremost, where you're operating under the cover of intentionality, where I guess you like feeling secure in what you're going after as opposed to being confident in the fact that you're going to get there. Kind of lose sight of what you're going for. You're kind of just like, I'm losing weight. Look at me. It's like, well, okay, but are you believing? Are you trusting God? Like, first of all, is it even in this particular pursuit? Sorry, just an example. Not saying that, God wouldn't promote you living a healthy lifestyle. I'm just saying, like, I guess that example came to mind because a lot of people are trying to lose weight and exercise and eating well. That's all good. Like, there's some common sense to our resolutions that, God's like, no, you shouldn't eat healthy. Of course he's going to be for that. But I think it's good to even ask, like, Lord, how do you want me to improve my healthy lifestyle, my life wellness habits? Nothing is off limits as far as going to God and just inquiring his wisdom. So, all right. So oftentimes there's this disconnect between what is good for us and what we want to be good for us. Our efforts will be shallow if our convictions are shallow. Our efforts will also be shallow if we're not truly desiring the outcome, the sacrifice required to get to that outcome. Or if there are any doubts that we could get there, life will cooperate amidst the pursuit. I think that's a big one for us. We want things to kind of yield to us while we're being intentional so that we can get there. And it's often the other way around. Sometimes that's when the heat's cranked up and we encounter new strongholds and attacks of the enemy, challenges that weren't there before, hurdles that weren't there before. It's like they are triggered when we decide to level up in some way. But this is the big part of intentionality. At the core, it's referencing the Lord and knowing if God is in it and just seeking his heart and then his will. Understanding, knowing the will. I want to go back to the Amplified version here because there's this one part that really, a lot of parts grip me about this. So verse 16, making the very most of your time on earth, recognizing and taking advantage of each opportunity and using it with wisdom and diligence. Interesting to note in verse 16, the Greek word in this verse means to buy up at the marketplace. Opportunity here is regarded as a commodity to be used by believers. Commodity, as I'm sure most of you know, it's a useful or valuable thing, such as water or time. It's an essential of life. So the word is really clear. Intentionality is not something that is optional. It's something that is required. Now, when it comes to the essentials of life, sometimes we take for granted one way or another. We assume like, all right, this is just something that we need to do. But I encourage you guys to really go after to have goals, outcomes, and resolutions, but to reference the Lord in all of it, and not to rely on your own understanding. To pull Proverbs 3 into this, we must not only receive the answer and the authorization from the Lord, but inquire of him on how to integrate those answers and authorizations into the priorities and commitments he's already established for us. This is another key point I want you to star as you listen to this. It's not just, sometimes we take a yes or a no, and we're good to go. Is our approach to reverencing, yielding to God. We're cool with getting the one-word answer or just the topical answer, and we don't really walk with God through the resolution, through the goal setting, through the achieving of a particular outcome that he says yes to. Wherever you are, whoever you are, you already have priorities and commitments that are already established. In the realm of grace, there's a natural rhythm embedded in the natural order of these priorities and commitments. For me as a dad and my wife as a mom, it's like it's okay to pray, seek the Lord, be like, all right, he wants us to go after this particular thing, but he obviously doesn't want that to, come at the detriment of being a parent when we need to be a parent, like watching our kids and making sure they're healthy and making sure they're safe, like protecting them when they need protection. That, we're being like God, like that's a priority that should not be breached by something that pertains to, say, His Go Friday or Fry Freelance. Family's going to come before that for us. As much as we love ministry and counseling and pouring into people, in this season of our life, we believe that we need to be available. We need to be there for our kids as they develop and grow in wisdom and stature. So I just want to encourage you to not only seek the Lord for that first answer, but to keep drilling down and seeking. That's kind of what David did when you look at Samuel. I know I'm kind of being very general here, but one thing I love about David's heart after God, a man after God's own heart, as he's known for, when you look at, I think I'm thinking of 2 Samuel 5, when I believe he goes to battle against the Philistines twice in that passage of 2 Samuel 5, and he gets a word on how to attack them the first time, but then David doesn't assume that the same tactic would work the second go around. God gives him a completely different method, a different tactic. And part of the reason why I love this verse is because you're getting into a whole different topic of what's the difference between strategy and tactics, and that's another component to intentionality that we could talk about later. If I do a part 2, I might integrate that in, but have that heart of David that just, wasn't content to seeking the Lord the first time, but kept seeking the Lord again and again, and knowing that, who am I to assume that the same thing is going to apply here? Like, God may have a very different idea in mind, and that's just how it is. So I'm right at the 20-minute mark, so just, hopefully this makes sense, that intentionality just needs to be this deep, communal concept, more than a concept. This is reality. I think we keep it in conceptual terms, and it just needs to be something that we look at intentionality through the lens of walking with God, not just living on purpose, because we could put that stamp on a lot of things, like, I'm living on purpose, look at me, and we flex our spiritual muscle. That's not what intention is not about by itself. You can't just put it in a vacuum and being like, I'm intentional, look at me, I am doing this new thing, and we get lost on the quantitative progress and the metrics of the word. But seeing it as part of appropriating our goals to the will of God, that's what intentionality is. It's keeping the goal in front of us by letting God go ahead of us, being imitators of Christ, living as children of light, knowing what's worth participating in, what's not worth participating in, and just seeing the opportunities that God has for us, the appointments, as divine commodities. This is all really good stuff. So that was a lot. That was kind of a fire hose. Again, this was fresh, so sorry. If you're not a fan of my style, okay, I understand that I'm still learning how to do this. I'm still working on the art, but you can't substitute passion. Like, I am, if I could somehow paint my passion on this topic, I think you'd have a lot of words to deal with. So, thank you for listening. As always, we're here for you if you need anything. If you need help on your goal setting, on just understanding what it's like to live an intentional, purposeful life, if you have questions on this topic, we'll be more than happy to sit down with you, talk to you, however that looks, even if it's just online in an instant message type context. I'm excited about this new year. I really believe that God is going to take us to the next level in multiple categories in our lives, and He's going to just show us more of who He is. That's just something I'm really excited about this year. Like, my reading the Bible in 3 months, it's not about the time frame. It's about, like, what? As long as I exist on this earth and then in the next world in heaven in communion with Him, I'm constantly going to be discovering more things about God. That's never going to stop. That's one of the very few things that will never change. And there's a finite amount to know about me, but there's an infinite amount to know about the Lord. And, we're just talking about one little facet of this topic, and there's infinite topics when it comes to God, right? So I'm excited about just getting into the deep end with you this year. And just last year was a pilot season. This is season 2 in a lot of ways. My next topic my next pod that I know I'm going to cut will debut in the next few weeks, and it's going to be 3 things I'm sorry about, part 2. Last year I did it. My very first official pod was, 3 things I'm sorry about, going back to the year 2017. But this will be a new, fresh list of things I'm sorry about going back to 2018. And this list is going to talk about not so much regrets, but kind of like target the best of conviction, the best convictions I had, and things I'm determined to do better with God's help, just breathing in me. So, all right, guys. Well, you are awesome, and again, we're here for you, and if there's anything we could do for you, we'd be glad to help. Till then, and as I always say, we'll catch you on the fry. Peace.